Greetings! Mantore79 here, and welcome back to another deck profile video for the Cardfight Vanguard trading card game. In today's video, the deck profile I'm going to be making one for is the standard formats: Dragon Empires, Dragonic Overlord, the end with Alder Hatchet Dragon. Alright then, let's begin. First up, the right deck. And now for the right deck. For the cards in this right deck, we're playing 1 Grade 0 Lizard Runner Undu, 1 Grade 1 Embodiment of Armor Bar, 1 Grade 2 Dragonic Overlord, and 1 Grade 3 Dragonic Overlord, the end. The Grade 0 Lizard Runner Undu, starting unit. Its skill, auto, when this unit is written upon, if you went second, draw a card. So for Undu, it's the main starting unit to play in this deck. Just by riding on top of it, with its skill, you can draw a card as long as you're the second to go in the game. The Grade 1 Embodiment of Armor Bar, its skills, first skill, auto, when this unit is written upon by Dragonic Overlord, cost, counterblast 1. If the cost has been paid, search your deck for up to 1 Grade 1 card, reveal it and put it in your hand and shuffle your deck. Second skill, auto, as a rear guard, once per turn. When your Vanguard's attack hits, this unit gets plus 5,000 power until end of turn. So for Bar, it's the main Grade 1 to ride this deck. Its first skill, just by riding Dragonic in the Hollow on top of it, by paying the cost of counterblast 1, you can search your deck for any Grade 1 for specific card and add to your hand. Then shuffle your deck after. So for this first skill, it's a good way to secure a specific Grade 1 you wish to add to your hand to use later on, like a perfect guard or a specific Grade 1 whose skill you can use later in the game. And the second skill, as a rear guard, as long as your Vanguard hits, it gets plus 5,000 powers. So this second skill, Bar can serve as a possible 13,000 point attacker from the front row or 13,000 point booster from the back row. The Grade 2 Dragonic Overlord, its skills, first skill, auto, when this unit is ridden upon by a unit with Overlord in its card name, call this card to the rear guard circle. Second skill, action, as a rear guard, once per turn. If you have a Vanguard with Overlord in its card name, cost, Soul Blast 1. If the cost is paid, this unit and all of your Vanguards get plus 5,000 power until end of turn. So for Nehalem, it's the main Grade 2 to ride this deck. Its first skill, just by riding a Overlord on top of Nehalem, you'll be able to superior call your Dragonic Overlord from your soul to the rear guard. Thus, with this first skill, it'll secure yourself a Dragonic Overlord, your rear guard, whose skill can later be used on your Vanguard Overlord later on. And the second skill, just by soul blasting 1 card, your Vanguard Overlord and Nehalem get power. So with this second skill, it's a good way to not only increase your Vanguard's power, but to also turn your Nehalem into a 15,000 point attacker from the front row. And the best part is, this skill is semi-stackable, though not by itself. If you're the type to play multiple Dragonic Overlords in your deck, as long as you've managed to secure multiple ones in your rear guard and don't mind paying a Soul Blast 1 for each one, it's possible to at least keep stacking power into your Vanguard Overlord. The Grade 3 Dragonic Overlord, the end, skills, first skill, continuous, as a Vanguard. During your turn, if your soul has a Dragonic Overlord, this unit's drive cannot decrease from card effects and it gets plus 5,000 power. And second skill, auto, as a Vanguard, once per turn. At the end of the battle, this unit attacked, cost, counterblast 1, discard 2 cards from your hand. If the cost is paid, stand this unit and it gets drive -1 until end of turn. So for Dragonic Overlord, the end, it's the main Grade 3 to ride this deck. Its first skill, as long as you've got a standard Dragonic Overlord in the soul, it can get plus 5,000 power and cannot have its drive checks reduced during your turn. So for this first skill, it's more like a cross-ride skill from the original series. As long as you either ride the end on top of Dragonic Overlord or have any cards that let you add Dragonic Overlord into your soul after getting the end to your Vanguard, this first skill will more or less make it possible for you to not only have a little extra power to work with, but to also secure 2 drive checks for each of Overlord's attacks. And the second skill, after attacking, regardless of hits or not, As long as you don't mind paying the cost of Counterblast 1 to discard 2 cards from hand, you can stand Overlord with a -1 drive. So for the second skill, it's a basic restanding skill for the Dragonic Overlord series. And the best part about this second skill, it's comboable with the first skill. For the first skill, as I mentioned before, as long as Overlord's in the soul, your drive checks cannot be reduced. So as long as you've got Overlord in the soul when using this second skill, you will not have to count the -1 drive. So for both of Dragonic Overlord, the end's attacks will have twin drive, thus securing the chance of getting more triggers or to simply restock your hand with more cards. And with that, we just about covered the deck's right deck. And now let's get on to the main deck. And now for the Great One lineup. For the Great Ones of this deck, we have 3 Drag Ritter Mid-Hats, 4 Drag Ritter Halbs, 3 Twin Buckler Dragons, and 1 Blitz Order Elementaria Sanctitude. The Great One, Drag Ritter Mid-Hat. Its skill is, as a rear guard, during your turn, whenever your Vanguard restands by a card effect, you may retreat Mid-Hot from your own rear guard. If the cost isn't paid, you can draw 1. So for Mid-Hot, he's more or less a supporting card for decks that specialize in restanding your Vanguard, like the Dragonic Overlord series. As long as you don't mind retreating him from your own rear guard, you'll be able to restock your hand with more cards for either to guard your opponent's attacks in their turn or to give yourself more options to work with during your next turn to attack your opponent and to possibly finish them off, making Mid-Hot a great card to have for both offensive and defensive purposes for the Dragonic Overlord series. The Great One, Drag Ritter Halt. Its skills are, the first skill, when this card will be discarded for the cost of your Vanguard with Overlord in its card name ability, it may be regarded as 2 cards. So as for Halt, if you play a Dragonic Overlord deck that requires you to discard cards in your hand as a cost, Halt can reduce the number of cards you need to discard by being counted as 2 cards, making it a good way to conserve your hand for defensive purposes, to guard your opponent's attacks, or to give yourself more options to work with, like having more cards to use in your next turn to attack. And the second skill of Drag Ritter Halt, when this card is discarded from your hand for the cost of a Dragonic Overlord skill, you may superior call it from the drop zone to your back row rearguard circle. If called by its own skill, it gets plus 5,000 power until the end of the turn. So as for the second skill of Halt, it works together with its first one. After being discarded for a Dragonic Overlord skill cost, you can superior call him to your back row to serve as a 13,000 power booster from the back row, making Halt a good way to discard from your hand for hand costs and also to give yourself more powerful attacks by serving as a powerful booster from the back row. The Great One, Twin Buckler Dragon, Perfect Guard, Sentinel. Just like any other Perfect Guard in the Cardfight Vanguard trading card game, it features the same skill and activation. When used to guard with, you may discard 1 card for the cost, then the attack that Twin Buckler is guarding against will be completely blocked. But it also features a second ability. When used to guard with, if you have less than 2 cards in hand, then you will not have to pay any hand cost to do a Perfect Guard, making a potential no-cost defense card as a last resort. And the Blitz Order, Elementaria Sanctitude. Its skill is, if your opponent has triple drive, this ability can be played without paying the cost. And the second skill, when used to guard with, you may discard 1 card from your hand. If your Vanguard is grade 3 or less, then choose one of your units. It cannot be hit until the end of the battle. After this card is used, remove it from play. So this Blitz Order more or less serves as a Perfect Guard, just like Twin Buckler Dragon, except it can be used as a no-cost Perfect Guard for opponents' Vanguards with triple drive. So more or less, just like Twin Buckler, it's a Perfect Guard that can be used generally and also for no-cost strategies if you wish to use it against a specific Vanguard, particularly ones with triple drive. And with that, we just about covered the deck's Great One lineup. Next, let's get on to the Great 2 lineup. And now for the grade 2 lineup. For the grade 2s in this deck, we're playing 4 grade 2 Alder Hatchet Dragon, 4 grade 2 Burning Horn Dragon, and 4 grade 2 Steel Bullet of Duststorm Ethan. The grade 2 Alder Hatchet Dragon. Its skills: first skill, continuous as a guardian. If your soul has a card with Overlord in its card name, this unit gets plus 5,000 shield. And second skill, action as a rear guard. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, cost, retire this unit. If the cost been paid, choose a grade 3 card with Overlord in its card name from your drop zone and put into your soul. So for Alder Hatchet Dragon, it's the one of the main grade 2s to play in this deck. Its first skill, while guarding with a Alder Hatchet Dragon, as long as you've got an Overlord card in your soul, it gets plus 5,000 shield. So with Alder Hatchet Dragon, by choosing to guard or intercept with Alder Hatchet, with the specific requirements more or less met, Alder Hatchet can serve as a 10,000 point shield on its own. And his second skill, as long as your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, as long as you don't mind giving up Alder Hatching your rear guard, you can take any grade 3 card with Overlord in its name and from your drop zone and put it into your soul. So for the second skill, it's not only a good way to restock your soul, but to also bypass the limitations of Dragonic Overlord at the end. Like I mentioned before in the right deck explanation, the end requires to have at least one standard Dragonic Overlord in your soul to activate its cross-right skill. So with Alder Hatchet, you will not have to wait for the usual one extra turn to simply cross-right from Dragonic Overlord to Dragonic Overlord at the end like normal. You can simply ride Dragonic Overlord at the end as your main grade 3 Vanguard, then just use Alder Hatchet's second skill to secure a standard Dragonic Overlord in the soul, thus securing yourself a 2 Vanguard attacks with 2 twin drives available. The grade 2 Burning Horn Dragon. Its skills: first skill, auto. When this unit is placed on the rearguard circle, cost, counterblast 1. If the cost is paid, look at the top 7 cards of your deck. Reveal up to 1 card of Overlord in its card name and put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. If you do not reveal a card, countercharge 1. Second skill, auto as a rear guard. When your Vanguard of Overlord in its card name attacks, this unit gets plus 5,000 power until end of turn. So for Burning Horn Dragon, it's a pretty powerful support card for the Dragonic Overlord series. Its first skill, just by calling to the rear guard and paying a counterblast of 1, you have the chance to check the top 7 cards of your deck for an Overlord and add to your hand. Thus, with this first skill, it's a good way to secure a Dragonic Overlord to either Persona Ride with, or to use for skill costs, or for any other reasons you wish to have any other extra grade 3 Dragonic Overlords in your hand to use. And the best part about this first skill, it's refundable. In the off chance you fail to add any new cards to your hand by the skill, you can countercharge 1, thus getting a refund for the counterblast 1 paid for this skill. And the second skill, whenever your Vanguard Overlord attacks, Burning Horn gets plus 5,000 power. So for this second skill, it makes Burning Horn a very powerful front row attacker for your Dragonic Overlord decks. And the best part about this second skill, it's stackable. With the Dragonic Overlord series that specializes in restanding and attacking multiple times your Vanguard, it's possible to keep pumping more power into your Burning Horn Dragon in your rear guard, as long as your Vanguard Overlord can restand and attack multiple times. And the grade 2 Steel Bullet of Duststorm Ethan. Skill, auto as a rear guard. When your Vanguard's attack hits, cost, retire this unit. If the cost is paid, draw a card and countercharge 1. So for Ethan, it's a pretty decent card to play in your Dragon Empire Nation decks, especially Dragonic Overlord. Its skill, as long as your Vanguard's attack hits on either an opponent's Vanguard or rear guard, as long as you don't mind retiring Ethan from your own rear guard, not only can you draw 1, but countercharge 1. So this skill is a good way to not only restock your hand, but to also refund your counterblast for later on. In my opinion, this Steel Bullet of Duststorm Ethan is more or less like a superior version of the Great One Dragon Monk Gojo. For Dragon Monk Gojo, skill requires that you only boost a successful attack from your Vanguard to activate its countercharge skill. Ethan, by my opinion, is much more flexible, as its skill merely states your Vanguard's attack has to merely hit the opponent. You can then not have to worry about where you place Ethan on your rear guard. As long as you just manage to land the attack, Ethan can let you not only countercharge 1 like Gojo does, but to also let you draw more cards. Thus, in my opinion, Steel Bullet Duststorm Ethan is a much more superior card than the Great One Dragon Monk Gojo to play in your Dragonic Overlord decks. And with that, we just about covered the deck's grade 2 lineup. And now for the grade 3 lineup. And now for the grade 3 lineup. For the grade 3s in this deck, we're playing 4 grade 3 Dragonic Overlords and 3 grade 3 Dragonic Overlord, the end. The grade 3 Dragonic Overlord. Its skills: first skill, continuous, as a vanguard or rear guard. During the battle this unit attacked a rear guard, your opponent cannot call cards from their hand to the Guardian Circle. And second skill, auto, as a vanguard, once per turn. When this unit's attack hits, counterblast 1 and discard a card from your hand. If the cost has been paid, you can stand this unit and it gets drive -1 until end of turn. So for Dragonic Overlord, it's one of the main grade 3s to play in this deck. Its first skill, your vanguard or rear guard overlord, when attacking an opponent's rear guard, they cannot guard cards from their hand. So for this first skill, as long as you attack an opponent's rear guard in the front row with Dragonic Overlord, it'll be almost an unstoppable attack since your opponent cannot guard with their cards from their hand. And the second skill for your Vanguard Overlord, just by landing a successful attack on either your opponent's Vanguard or rear guard, by paying the cost, you can restand your Vanguard Overlord again for another attack at the additional cost of reducing your drive check by 1. So for this second skill, it's more or less like a basic restanding skill for the Overlord series. And the best part is, this second skill is comboable with the first skill. So it immediately says you have to land a successful attack. So by comboing the first skill, where you can make a almost absolute on-hit skill on your opponent's rear guard, you'll be able to guarantee your Vanguard Overlord to restand by comboing the two skills. And now the grade 3 Dragonic Overlord, the end. But since I already mentioned this card's skills and effects during the right deck explanations, there's no need to get any further into it, so skipping ahead. And with that, we just about covered the deck's grade 3 lineup. Now for the trigger lineup. And now for the trigger lineup. For the triggers in this deck, we have 1. Dragon Deity King of Resurgence, Drag Vita, over trigger. 4. Burning Flail Dragons, critical triggers. 4. Blazing Dual Monk, Sogyo, critical triggers. 3. Flare Veil Dragons, draw triggers. 2. Stealth Fiend Amaviras, heal triggers. And 2. Cure Flare Draco Kids, heal triggers. Grade 0, Dragon Deity King of Resurgence, Drag Vita, over trigger. Its skill is, like any other over trigger, when revealed in a drive check or damage check, by removing this card from play, you can draw 1 card and give 1 unit on your field 100 million power. But there's also an additional ability for Drag Vita. When revealed during a drive check, you can also stand one of your vanguards. So this over trigger is more or less specialized for giving your Dragon Empire Vanguard an additional attack by restanding it, making it a good card to use with the Overlord series. The grade 0, Burning Flail Dragon, critical trigger. Its skill is, as a rear guard, after the battle where it boosted, you may move Burning Flail from your rear guard to your soul. If the cost has been paid, you may give 1 unit on your field plus 2000 power till the end of the turn. So with this skill, Burning Flail is a good way to not only give one of your remaining units like your Vanguard or rear guard additional power, but to also restock your Vanguard soul for later Soul Blast costs. The grade 0, Flare Veil Dragon, draw trigger. Its skill is, when used to guard with, if your Vanguard is at grade 3 or more, then it gets plus 5000 shield until the end of the turn. So with this draw trigger, Burning Flail can serve as a 10,000 point shield as long as you get to grade 3, making it a decent defense despite having only 5000 base. Its skill make it more powerful in the defensive wise. The grade 0, Stealth Fiend Amavira, heal trigger, counter heal. Its skill is, when used to guard against an attack that a unit that has attacked twice or more in the turn, she gets plus 15,000 shield until the end of the battle. So for example, if you use her to guard against a Vanguard or rear guard that has attacked after restanding, she becomes a 25,000 point shield, making her a good way to guard against units that specialize in restanding their Vanguards or rear guards. The grade 0, Cure Flare Draco Kit, heal trigger, heal guardian. Its skill is, when used to guard against an attack whose critical was risen to 2 or more, not by base critical or drive triggers, then he gets plus 15,000 shield until the end of the battle. So for Cure Flare, he's a good way to guard against units like the Vanguard or Rear Guard that powers up its critical by skill or card effects. But like I said before, it only works against skill and card effects, meaning criticals that have risen by base critical or by drive triggers will not be counted for this skill. And with that, that just about covers the deck's trigger lineup. For the triggers in this deck, we have 1 over trigger, 8 critical triggers, 3 draw triggers, and 4 heal triggers. And now, after having just explained the deck's build and card effects, let's get on to explain the deck's main playstyle. So for the main playstyle of this deck, you just have to normally ride from grade 0 to grade 3. And make sure your grade 3 is Dragonic Overlord at the end. And then when the conditions are met, either your opponent's Vanguard has to be grade 3, or if your opponent's Vanguard is already grade 3, you just have to make sure you secure a standard Dragonic Overlord in your drop zone. And then secure a Alder Hatchet Dragon in your hand to call it the rear guard. Use Alder Hatchet's skill to retire itself, and then add a Dragonic Overlord into your soul. And with Overlord in the soul, the end's cross-ride skill activates, where it gets an extra 5,000 power and its drive check cannot be reduced. And with that, Dragonic Overlord the end can then attack your opponent's Vanguard and more or less have both its drive checks for its 2 attacks. So that's pretty much the main playstyle of this deck. Just ride normally to Dragonic Overlord at the end. Then, when your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, make sure you have a standard Dragonic Overlord in the drop zone and 1 Alder Hatchet in your hand to call the rear guard. Use Alder Hatchet's skill to secure and put Overlord, the standard, into your Vanguard soul, thus reducing the penalty of the restanding skill, and also cutting back the time you need to usually take to ride the Dragonic Overlord at the end normally by cross-riding it from standard Dragonic Overlord to the end. So again, simple, just ride to grade 3 Dragonic Overlord at the end from your ride deck. Once your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, call Alder Hatchet, use its skill to move the end into your soul, thus skipping the need to cross-ride normally and just having a Vanguard that can attack twice and twin drive twice for its 2 attacks. And with that, just about covered the deck's main playstyle. And with that, I've just about pretty much covered the deck's main deck build, the card effects, and the main playstyle meant to be used with this deck. So first off, I want to say thank you to the viewers for watching today's video, and to please stay tuned for more videos I plan to upload again in the near future. I also hope you all show your support by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing to my videos and channel. And with that, I say goodbye and see you all soon.